The Business of Business San Antonio is supported by Texas Mutual Workers' Compensation Insurance.
Welcome to the Business of Business San Antonio. I'm your host, Henry Cisneros, and in this hour, we're going to delve into the top business sectors driving the local economy, and there are many of them: medical research, tourism, the military, technology, and higher education, just to name a few. The economy of San Antonio is one of the best in the country at this time. What are we doing right, and what are the areas that need attention? These are some of the questions we want to delve into. Let's look into the crystal ball for 2023 and beyond. And the right person to start us down this path of delving into the economy of San Antonio is Jenna Salcedo Herrera, President and CEO of Greater SATX. You'll remember it as the former San Antonio Economic Development Foundation, but under Jenna's leadership, it's been rebranded. Jenna, give us a sense of what the idea was in the rebranding and what it implies in terms of a change of strategy or direction.
Sure. Well, first of all, as you know, Henry, our organization has existed for over 45 years, and we are extremely proud of that history and our legacy as an organization, but equally as proud of where we're going as an organization. So today we are Greater SATX, a regional economic partnership, but our mission remains the same. Our mission is about jobs, job creation. How we go about delivering on that mission has evolved drastically over the years. So we have evolved our portfolio of services. We continue to be focused on corporate attraction or recruitment, but also focused on business retention and expansion, trade and export development, and probably most importantly, workforce development. So our portfolio of services has evolved, and also our scope and service territory has evolved. So we represent the broader 8-county region, San Antonio proper, of course, but the broader MSA. And that's, of course, not a novel idea in economic development. Most top-performing metro areas are structured as regional EDOs, but we evolved to a regional economic development construct over a year ago.
Now, this change has occurred over time. And obviously, at some point, somebody said, well, we need to focus on trade, and we have an export entity at work, but it's sort of spinning around on its own, and that ought to be brought in. And then this, as you say, major development of bringing in workforce. Tell me just a sense of how that occurred. Was it some particular leadership that created that, or just circumstances that required it over time?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
I mean, as we were evolving our strategy, you have to look at the state of play within the San Antonio community. And we had a few different organizations that had been created over time to fill a void or to fulfill a service. And as we were thinking about the comprehensive strategy, it made sense to integrate in certain scenarios and then acquire in certain scenarios. So we pulled the Free Trade Alliance under the umbrella.
Right.
And we also integrated SA Works, which was less of an organization, more of a brand, as our workforce development partner. And by the way, going back to the name change, that was also a part of it. When you inherit cultures, when you inherit teams of people,
Got it.
the EDF brand of old didn't necessarily resonate with all these different organizations.
Right.
So,
I assume the Greater SATX has meaning of its own.
that's my favorite part, because for me, the greater denotes progress. It means that we want greater for SATX, for San Antonio, Texas.
But it's also greater in a geographic sense.
100%, yeah.
So now we have this 8-county focus. So when good things happen in Seguin, for example, with the Caterpillar company, that redounds to the benefit of the region, and we function more as a region. And I assume that the automotive commitments here, Toyota, Navistar, all the suppliers, et cetera, suggest a regional effort as well.
That's exactly right. And when most international or even domestic companies, when they're looking at investments, capital investments, job investments, they're not necessarily looking at city limits, right? They're looking at where their people will come from. And so manufacturing is a perfect example of the multiplier effect. When Toyota or Navistar located here, they needed those suppliers within the region to support them. Tesla is another example.
So how are we doing, Jenna? Tell me about right this minute.
So Henry, I think we're doing great. We continue to have regional announcements for manufacturing operations. Marici and Seguin, Aishan, AW, and Cibolo is expanding, and more to come on the Navistar front as well.
How big a blow was the pandemic? Are we through it? Do you have a sense for where we stand in the national picture after the pandemic?
The pandemic didn't discriminate, and so it impacted San Antonio and all of our industries, just like it impacted the rest of the world.
We had a slowdown in attraction?
We did. In fact, we actually refocused our attention here in San Antonio. We were trying to stop the bleeding and supporting primarily small businesses.
Right.
But we've since recovered from a job perspective. And if you look actually at our educational attainment in San Antonio, we actually grew by 3% during the pandemic in 2020 as a year, and that was higher than the rest of the country. So
how significant is the Austin-San Antonio connection? One has a sense that this could be the beginnings of a major central Texas metroplex from Pflugerville to Floresville, and points in between like Comal County and Hays County that are among the fastest growing counties in the country. Is that a real deal, or are we going to be basically separate in our economic development endeavors?
It's a very real deal, and I would actually drag that southern line down all the way into Monterey. I think right now the I-35 corridor, San Antonio to Austin, that's the most dynamic employment corridor in the country. If we can continue to work together and amplify our efforts, I think we'll be unstoppable.
And the collaboration with workforce, tell me a bit about that, because that's a real expansion of mission, but clearly a critical ingredient in your economic development efforts.
Yeah, today economic development is workforce development. So talent, or the availability of talent, is the #1 site selection criteria that CEOs are considering. So San Antonio and the region, we've got to have that readily available workforce to fill their needs.
Jenna, people are very impressed with your leadership in these early years. How are you holding out yourself? How are you doing in terms of grabbing the job and moving it?
It's been a lot of fun. I think we've got so much opportunity ahead. Every day's different, so it keeps me energized, it keeps me engaged, and I think I've got the best job in the country.
Well, and I think the community's fortunate to have you in that job, and you pulled together some very good people. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Henry.
Let's take a look at the biomedical sector in San Antonio. It has a massive impact in our economy. The South Texas Medical Center alone produced more than $42 billion in regional economic impact in 2019, and the number continues to grow. Dr. Bill Henrich joins us. He's the president and CEO of UT Health, which is the combination of all of the UT medical assets in San Antonio, the medical school, dental school, nursing school, and a lot of research. Dr. Henrich, congratulations on your excellent work as leadership of the UT Health, but truly the biomedical sector in our community, leading spokesman for it. Give us a sense of the scale of the biomedical sector in San Antonio and significance in our economy.
Scale is impressive. Now a $44 billion contributor to the San Antonio economy. 1 in 6 employed San Antonians are employed in either healthcare, bioscience, something related to the two.
I understand that's about 160,000 jobs or people,
160,000 jobs. And at the UT Health end of the spectrum, the major research engine for bioscience in the city. For example, we have a portfolio that touches $400 million annually in sponsored programs.
Of research.
It's divided into 2 main sectors. One is the clinical research. We have 700 trials, 740 trials open, about a third of them in cancer, and another 100 in dementia and Alzheimer's disease, but across the whole spectrum of medical illnesses you'd expect, including long COVID and cardiovascular disease. and then an array of funded biomedical scientists who have competed well for NIH funding, National Institutes of Health funding.
Basic research.
Basic research at the bench.
Right. And then you have the medical school, the nursing school, the dental school, which has been ranked #1 in the country from time to time. And what other medical education?
We have a School of Health Professions, which is a potpourri of absolutely critical health professional training, including things like respiratory therapists, physician's assistants,
Got it.
physical therapists, and so on.
Yeah.
We have a graduate school of biomedical sciences, which trains people for master's and PhD degrees in the bench sciences,
Right.
so in the hard sciences. And then the new school, which we're very proud that we just started, is the new School of Public Health.
Now, you've also created a hospital setting. Can you describe that? It's brand new, right?
It is. We focused on an element that we judged to be a need area in San Antonio, and that was sophisticated cancer care. I think you're aware of the fact that cancer is the most difficult disease to diagnose precisely and the most difficult disease to treat accurately.
Got it.
And every week, every month, there are new clinical trials which advance the ball in cancer science and cancer clinical care. So to be able to deliver all the new immunotherapies which are on the shelf now for cancer care and lead to long survivals and cures.
Yeah.
The fact is we decided to focus on that. So this new hospital we are building, which we will wholly own and operate, is a cancer-focused hospital.
And will it be faculty members who have a major role? So people off the medical school faculty?
It will. In fact, it's connected to our Mays, our National
Right.
Cancer Institute designated cancer center,
And
the Mays
basically
Cancer
part
Center.
of your campus.
That's right,
Yeah.
part of the campus. And so this will be a major advance, I think. And you know, the idea here was to make certain that nobody had to leave San Antonio.
Right.
I mean, they could, but they don't have to.
So putting on your larger hat of a leader of the biosciences generally beyond UT Health, major breakthroughs in recent years at the county hospital, University Health, at Texas Biomed, infectious diseases. Give us just a sense of the larger picture of the biosciences beyond UT Health.
Yeah, beyond UT Health, our primary partner is University Health System, along with the Veterans Hospital.
That's the county hospital.
That's the county hospital, and it's an excellent hospital. And
Constantly building new facilities.
constantly,
it seems.
just a new women and children's facility to open next year in 2024. And we're very proud of the fact that it's a home to so many of our faculty. We staff that hospital, and I think the viewers should know that our students, our residents, interns, and fellows are all in that hospital, and I think it's the reason for the great care that's rendered there, so that's very important. In the larger sense, across the city, I'm very proud of the partnerships we have with Texas Biomed, with Southwest Research, with UTSA.
Texas
and with
Biomed.
Texas Biomed, and with ourselves to form a partnership called San Antonio Partnership for Precision Therapeutics. And there, we're trying to capture what I think is unique about our system, our ecosystem in research here in San Antonio.
Right.
And it goes to the area of drug development. Right. So to do drug development, you have to have biochemists who can identify a target. Then you've got to be able to test the target at the bench, and then you've got to be able to develop a drug, which is medicinal chemistry, and then you've got to be able to test it in primates. With the combination of Texas Biomed, with Southwest Research, with us and our element, and also with UTSA, we have the whole pipeline in one place.
So is that an example of the kind of progress San Antonio is making as a medical complex? Are you generally optimistic that we're on a pathway to even more significant biomedical growth?
Yes. In fact, there are a number of drugs not only in that pipeline, but there are now drugs which are being tested in clinical trials.
Okay.
So this is home to a burgeoning area, which I think is absolutely essential, and one of San Antonio's major calling cards in the future.
Doctor, thank you very much for joining us today and giving us a sense for the tremendous progress at UT Health, but generally across our economy in the biosciences. Thank you for your leadership. Keep up the good work.
Thanks, Henry.
The new kid on the block in terms of economic growth in our city is technology. According to TechBlock, the local technology industry generates an annual economic impact of nearly $11 billion. That's up 27% over the last decade. The number of IT companies in San Antonio jumped 36% just in the last 5 years. That's a third increase from the number 5 years ago. One of the leaders of the tech scene here is Charles Wooden. He's CEO of Geekdom. And let me begin by asking you, Charles, to describe Geekdom to people who may not know about it. You've had great success, but give me the underlying strategy of Geekdom.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. So Geekdom is a place that helps create startups. That's our whole goal. And so we've been around for about 12 years now, and in that 12 years, we've helped launch hundreds of companies. Our goal is to build San Antonio one startup at a time, and our goal over the next 10 years is to launch 500 startups, with 75% of them calling San Antonio home.
How does that compare with what's happening in other cities in your understanding of the field?
I would say that we're still kind of in the early stages of growing this startup ecosystem here in San Antonio, but there's a lot of good groundwork that's been laid over the past 10 years just with some of the factors that you were talking about in the intro. And so for us, it's now capitalizing on that and utilizing other innovation hubs across the city, being able to combine all those and to help launch these next 500 startups, giving them a new place.
And Charles, I want to thank you personally because I've watched your work and I know this wouldn't be happening without your personal vision and engagement. Describe for our audience the process. How do you identify companies that are worth your time and investing? And then the dynamic of what occurs to give them the support and create a successful exit, if you will, from the startup.
Of course, yeah. So we at Geekdom try to focus as early as we possibly can to find a founder who just has an idea but is a little bit too hesitant to talk about it. We have programs like Startup Weekend that help them get those ideas out and into the open. We get them into an incubator program where we help shape that idea, create a business plan, and help them do some market research, get them into a pre-accelerator program. These are all housed within Geekdom, where they're able to then pitch that idea, get ready for funders, or get ready to go out into the market. And then we also have a community fund where we inject $25,000 into those early stage startups to be able to get them a little bit of funding, get them over a little hump, and get them out into the open. And we also helped launch a cybersecurity accelerator this year, injecting $100,000 into 6 separate companies, and then helping them get connections locally to be able to get the next workforce and continue to grow that company.
Thank you, because that's the only effort that I know of that significance and that level of organization in our city. So the successes we will have in tech will be largely attributable to the dynamic that you've created. Tell us, as lay people, kind of what it feels like. What do you see when you see a business that has potential? What do you hear about an idea? Maybe using an example.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a great example. So there's a company based out of Geekdom, or that started out of Geekdom, called FloatMe. I was there when they pitched that idea back in Startup Weekend in 2017.
And what was the idea?
The idea was that they were going to be able to help people avoid the predatory loan systems that are out there and help float them really small amounts of money to be able to get them over an emergency need. And what they do now is they're able to do that to help you avoid the costs of overdraft fees and things like that. And it's been amazing. They're exponentially growing every month, it seems. They've raised nearly $50 million in capital and have over 60 employees across 3 cities and are continuing to grow here in San Antonio. And it's all led by a Latino founder based out of the Rio Grande Valley by the name of Josh Sanchez. He's just doing amazing work.
Why was that a technology idea?
Because the way that they use it through an app to be able to connect people and to get those loans out to them really quick at rapid speed so that they avoid those emergency fees.
So this is a successful company now functioning in the economy at large.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Well, congratulations and thank you for the work. Keep it up, Charles. We need that sector to grow. Are you optimistic?
I'm very optimistic. We're currently tracking 104 startups that are a part of our ecosystem in some way, shape, or form. That's 100 out of that 500 we're aiming for. And the other promising thing is 68 of those 104 are led by minority or women founders, which is just really great to see the diversity of this city kind of coming out through that startup ecosystem.
Well, we need you on the job. Keep going.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
In any city, small business is at the heart and soul of the local economy. Of almost all businesses we're talking about today, small businesses may have faced the hardest of times in the last few years with the pandemic, and now with inflation and wage increases. Our next guest covers small business on a regular basis as editor-in-chief of the San Antonio Business Journal, Ed Arnold. Welcome to the show. First of all, congratulations on the role that the Business Journal plays in our community.
Absolutely.
I remember when it was basically just a recorder of courthouse information, and it's grown into a very serious business journal.
We're very proud of it.
And you're part of a network of business journals across the country.
Absolutely.
I find it must-reading.
Thank you so much.
Tell me about your personal kind of experience and sense of small business and its role in a local economy.
Truly the heartbeat of any economy, regardless of the size, small towns, big cities. The small business community really drives the economy. The success of the small business community really does define whether a city is doing well or not. Some cities may have large corporate presences, but without the backbone of small businesses to support it, that economy is going to founder.
Yeah. I always thought of it as sort of a foundation under the economy. And you may have good luck or bad luck with respect to large businesses. They come to town, some of them leave, they lay off massive numbers of people or something. But the small business economy keeps the jobs going. And we make a big thing about a company coming to town and bringing 500 jobs. But we can probably create 500 jobs in small business on almost a monthly basis.
Absolutely. I think about it sort of as candy versus eating your vegetables, right? Like these big corporations coming in, who wouldn't want those jobs? I mean, TJ Maxx opened a huge distribution facility down the south side. They gave a lot of life to a part of town that needed more development, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that's a candy injection. That's a sugar high. What you really want is your vegetables every day, which is what small businesses are to a local economy.
So how do you think we're doing as a city in supporting small businesses? I find there are very few cities in the country that can actually say we have a functioning small business strategy. And part of that is because there's so many. How do you devise services for such a broad base? And also, they're so different.
Exactly.
So tell me about how you think San Antonio is doing.
I would say that there are several really wonderful success stories that I'd like to point to. So Sage, for example, Robert Liddell has a program called Back Office over at Sage, San Antonio Growth on the east side.
Yes.
Where essentially he mentors businesses. Small business comes to him and says, I'd like to expand, but I don't really know where to go for capital. I'm having a hard time with my accounting on the back office. He reaches in, helps them, and sort of mentors these small businesses. Those are the kind of programs that are personal, that are connective, that are one-to-one, that the city needs to figure out ways to scale. Southside First, for example, another wonderful economic development organization here in town, they have a wonderful series of workshops for small businesses about helping them get access to SBA loans, about access to how to do their own social media marketing. Really strong workshops that small businesses need to have. How do we figure out how to scale those beyond these smaller shops and smaller organizations and make it a cohesive group?
Yep.
That's what's missing to me.
In a city like San Antonio with its particular demographics, large minority population of Latinos and African Americans, how do you think we're doing with respect to punching up the capacity of minority-owned small businesses? The statistics show a pretty good gap.
Yes.
And not only in numbers, but in size. Many high percentage of the minority businesses are single-person entities.
That's right.
What strikes you as the arena for action?
I think that one of the most important things is a lesson that I learned in the wake of the pandemic, or in the early days of the pandemic, with the PPP program, right? Which was a lifeblood, saving tons and tons of businesses, and very important. But what we found in the aftermath was the people that found themselves out, the small businesses that found themselves on the outside looking in, were the ones that didn't have the connection with a local banker. They didn't have those interconnections. And those were more often minority women-owned businesses that didn't have that inside connection. That's what's lacking. It's not just that the city does a pretty good job of encouraging minority business, doing its due diligence when it comes to its contracting and those. It does an excellent job with that. But what we don't have is an opportunity for many of these minority-owned businesses to connect with the broader economic framework where they can get resources that's deprived of them.
And what about procurement on the part of our larger enterprises, sometimes public? I think we have something like 14 major public organizations, like the power company, CPS, Water Systems, SAWS, Port San Antonio, UTSA, the Community College, the San Antonio River Authority, the Health Science Center, et cetera. There's about 14 of them.
Absolutely.
Is it important that they engage with small business, and particularly minority businesses?
Absolutely.
Is that a viable and important strategy?
It's an incredibly important strategy. Public money being properly guided in the allocation and procurement phases, it can give a whole range of services and expansion to those small businesses they never saw before.
And thereby strengthen the base, the foundation
Without a doubt.
of the local economy.
Without a doubt.
So how does the Business Journal cover small business?
Sure, in a lot of different ways. We have awards programs that honor small businesses, but also one of the things we want to do in the new year, in fact, is encourage more connections between small businesses and those resources that we talked about. Give more attention to that Southside First Workshop program, more attention to the West Side Economic Development Council and what they're doing, and try to create a more cohesive view so that a small business owner can pick up our paper and find resources. That's what I think.
Well, I think the Business Journal in that respect could become a major asset.
I hope so.
To small business and thereby to our larger economic future. Thank you very much for identifying that role.
Not at all.
And good luck carrying it out.
Thank you very much. Honored to be with you.
Thank you.
you.
San Antonio is Military City, USA, and we benefit every day from the impact that local bases have on our economy. A recent study from the Texas Comptroller's Office estimates Joint Base San Antonio, made up of Fort Sam Houston, Lackland Air Force Base, and Randolph Air Force Base, generate an estimated economic impact of $39 billion in 2021. Major General Juan Ayala is the Director of Military and Veteran Affairs for the city. And I'd like to start the conversation, General, by asking you how our military missions came through the pandemic, whether they were impacted in any appreciable way, and where we stand going forward.
Well, the military missions were not really impacted. The military missions continued throughout the pandemic. As a matter of fact, we cooperated and partnered very strongly with the military because about 85% of those that are in uniform don't live on base, they live off base. So COVID, the virus does not have a fence line, and so we cooperated. We talked every day with them, as a matter of fact, and we cooperated on protocols because the protocols for the Department of Defense were different than the ones in the city. So we cooperated with them, and when the vaccines came around and when the testing was being done, we did it in conjunction with the military. So we spoke every day, and as far as the military missions, they continued, and which I think is important.
We have critical missions that can't afford to
Yes, sir.
be on the back burner for any appreciable time.
Yeah, we have missions that are essential to national defense here. As you well know, we have some unique missions here that are only done here in San Antonio.
Let's talk about those missions and going forward. Randolph Air Force Base, headquarters of Air Training Command, in good shape, in your opinion?
Yeah, they're in great shape. Air Education and Training Command there, the Air Force's Personnel Office. We have some training wings there, and they are the Air Force's training wing for fighter pilots, for new pilots. And as a matter of fact, they're in very good shape, and I think we're going to keep them for a while. Some of their aged aircraft for training are being replaced by new aircraft here pretty soon.
And Lackland Air Force Base is the headquarters of all basic training, every basic trainee coming into the Air Force, unlike the other services that have multiple basic training facilities, Air Force has one. It's Lackland.
Right. It's basic military training is there at Lackland, and during the pandemic, they had to take some folks out, but to Mississippi for the training, and that was the only pause. But they're back here, and not only do they train all our Air Force recruits, but they also train our new Space Force recruits.
And our officer training as well?
There is some officer training there. We have several schools there that are Department of Defense schools. The canines, the working dogs are there, and our security police also train there. And also, we have a special warfare wing, which we advocated for very hard.
This is the cybersecurity?
It's not cybersecurity, but they train, the warfare wing is for special missions.
Oh, I see. Do we also have cyber?
Yes, we have the Air Force here has their main base here, or their main headquarters for cybersecurity. And
Is that
they're here
part
at
of Lackland?
They're part of Lackland,
Okay,
yes.
got it. And then, of course, there's Fort Sam Houston, which is headquarters of...
Yes, it's Army South and Army North,
Right.
which are both the land components to the combatant commander for the defense of the Western Hemisphere. So if you look at the Western Hemisphere and the Army's participation in it, the Army's role it's here. It's
And then
at
the
Fort
other
Sam
massive role at Fort Sam Houston is medicine, which used to be Army medicine,
Right.
but it's moving more and more toward all of the services having their primary training for doctors and medics
Yes.
here.
Yes. So we have a jewel here, and the jewel is Brooke Army Medical Center, which is the only level 1 trauma center, which is for the most complex types of traumas, gunshots, car wrecks, which are battlefield type of wounds.
Correct.
And so we train those medical professionals, medical teams here.
And also serve people who've been wounded, servicemen who've been wounded in combat in
Yes.
other parts of the world are brought here.
Yes.
Burn victims and...
We have a 40-bed burn unit here that does that, and we have to also remember the cooperation with the community that we have here. 85% of those level 1 trauma patients are not Department of Defense, they're not military, they're civilians from the community that have nothing to do with the military.
Now, in your job, are you also working with the people who decide to retire here? So we have a reputation for being a great place to retire, and many do.
Yes.
And they find their way into our economy, including the medical personnel who are helping create our biosciences sector
Yes.
here. Do you work with that dynamic?
Yes, we work and support very much our transitioning veterans. And what we do here is we have a couple of programs. The City of San Antonio has invested 4 years worth of funding for spouse employment. Spouses, families make decisions on whether they retire, whether they re-enlist or not. And so we work with that. We also have pre-K for SA, which has a priority for military members. We have several programs. We also have a Commission on Veterans Affairs,
Yeah.
which we have every member of our council has a veteran representative that advises that council member and the mayor on issues of common concern.
And of course, we have a large veterans sector,
do.
active veterans sector with the Veterans Hospital here.
Yes.
Talk about that for just a minute, their contribution in the community.
Well, besides the impact, their economic impact, we have several, about 100,000 or more retirees, which that's a paycheck. And we also have, many of them are working not only throughout the community, but I'll give you an example. The city of San Antonio has 1,300 veterans that work for the city of San Antonio. So not only did they contribute and
Yeah.
give back to their country, now they're giving back to their community.
And they bring leadership training, and they bring experience, can-do experience,
Right.
much like you have. Thank you for your service to our country, General Officer, and then all of the functions you've fulfilled in San Antonio since your retirement. This is a unique job that you hold. Not every city has a person in this position, but it's appropriate for San Antonio to do it. We're fortunate to have someone of your background and skill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've heard for years about the importance of tourism to the San Antonio economy. Tourism and the hospitality industries generated a total of $16 billion in revenue for our economy in 2021. And while tourism brings in support for area businesses, it also supports the city itself with funds from the hotel tax. Visitors paid around $229 million in taxes and fees to the city of San Antonio in 2021. Mark Anderson is president and CEO of Visit San Antonio, and he joins us today to talk about tourism and hospitality. Mark, first and foremost, the obvious question, How are we doing as the pandemic begins to wind down? In practical fact, where do we stand at this point?
We stand compared to many other major cities in the United States in a very positive fashion. We're going to end this year, 2022, about 0.5 percentage point behind 2019 pre-pandemic levels. But next year we're going to reach.
What measure is that?
We're going to end at about 66.4%.
No, but I mean, this is occupancy?
Occupancy for our hotels.
Got it.
But our hotels are seeing historic average daily rates, ADR, and how they measure the revenue for their hotel is RevPAR, which is revenue per available room. And for San Antonio, we're seeing historic highs.
What is the dynamic at work there? Conventions are starting back up. Tourists are moving around. Family groups to our amusement amenities. What's the dynamic?
Our leisure has been incredibly strong throughout the recovery of the pandemic. Our conventions are coming back. Our local Texas conventions are seeing historic highs. The Texas high school coaches was with us this summer. They saw more than 17,000 attendees. We just had a major technology radiology convention called Astro. They had nearly 10,000 attendees. Now that's an international convention, so as we kind of work through the visa problems that we're having with the United States and getting people to our country. They were about 2,000 people down from international attendees, but they fared very well when you look at their pre-pandemic numbers.
I was always impressed with the role of the Texas conventions because they move around the major cities of Texas, maybe 4 cities or so. But the librarians and the lawyers and the firefighters and, every possible occupational group eventually has a convention. And we've always been a big hit with them. They enjoy coming to San Antonio. They bring the family and stay an extra day at SeaWorld.
Sure do, yeah.
Something. Is that dynamic rising? Can you tell?
It is, and we're being very competitive in offering these local Texas associations great packages for San Antonio to keep them here on a little bit more regular of a basis. I'm very competitive, so we don't want them to necessarily go to Austin or Houston or Dallas. We want to keep them here, we're doing our due diligence. But we're also focusing now on international conventions for our city that will, we're positioning ourselves as a global brand. We just opened offices 2 weeks ago in London, and we have plans to open in China and South America in the coming years. So we are really positioning ourselves for the first time ever as a global brand. So bringing international conventions in that have those global audiences is very important for our city's growth.
Say a word about Visit San Antonio itself. We used to have the Visitors and Convention Bureau. We privatized it.
Yes.
It's now supported by the industry, and you work not for the city, but for the entity. Is that correct?
Well, we're actually under contract with the city, and we are basically, the easiest way to put it is we are the official sales and marketing arm domestically and globally for the city of San Antonio.
So tell San Antonians what you do.
Okay.
How do you market San Antonio?
We are the brand, we build the brand of San Antonio. We talk to leisure customers domestically and internationally so that they can come here and come on vacation.
How do you do that? Is that television ads or?
We run television ads, but mostly it's digital now and also through social media. We also have really ramped up our public relations and media efforts. We've hired a global PR agency last year for the first time in our history. So we're telling the story not only locally and people that can drive, the 41 million people that can drive into San Antonio. But we're talking to key markets throughout the United States. And now, of course, Mexico is very important to San Antonio. We love our Mexican visitors. Canada is important. But now we're taking our message global to starting in Europe as well.
There was a time when it felt to me like the convention and business and visitor industry was just so massive, so profound here that you could almost count on the downtown streets being full and the Riverwalk being crowded because of the visitors. Are we going to get back to that day, do you think, or is there something fundamentally different in the business that sets it at a different level?
No, I think we're going to see those levels come back next year in stronger numbers than any time in the history of the city. And I think that's going to continue to grow. By 2026, Henry, San Antonio will be within the top 15 international destinations for the United States, surpassing cities like Dallas and Chicago. So we are doing all the right things to position this city globally and domestically. And what that means for our residents is that we're driving more tax revenue for our city.
And jobs.
And jobs. I mean, we employ more than 150,000 local San Antonians in the hospitality industry. We're the third largest industry in this city.
Right.
And that means hundreds of $millions of tax revenue for our city and our state. So it's public safety with our police department, our fire department, infrastructure, and so much more.
Well, it sounds like we have the right person on the job.
Thank you.
Congratulations, and thank you for joining us today. We'll follow all of this with interest. It's always been an essential part of our economic future, and it sounds like you're putting us back on a track where it will be into the future.
Thank you very much. It's a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to be with you.
Few factors impact the local economy as much as higher education. An educated workforce brings higher paying jobs, which translates into residents having more money to spend in local businesses. It's the base of the economy, human capital. San Antonio has many excellent colleges and universities, all growing together, working toward the goal of a more educated community. Dr. Abel Chavez, president of Our Lady of the Lake University, and Priscilla Camacho, Chief Legislative Officer of the Alamo Community Colleges, are our guests today. Let me begin with Priscilla, whom I've known for a long time when you were the education expert at the Chamber of Commerce, and then you've done the same in the Dallas Chamber. So you're deeply steeped in how education works in the community. And we know that the community colleges are one of the most important educational assets in a community, and that's true in virtually every major market in the country. Ours has how many students now?
We have 66,000 students strong this semester, but annually we have about 100,000 that will matriculate. That's high school program students and our adult students.
So it clearly is the largest educational
Absolutely.
engine in the community. And it's particularly important because of its role, bringing students in who might not otherwise go to college, sometimes people later in life, and sometimes giving people the confidence that they should stay in education and go forward. Talk a little bit about the special role of a community college.
You know, we allow everyone into our campuses. We are a community college, and by that very name, we welcome high school program students, and as you mentioned, those adults who maybe got left behind decades ago and have felt empowered to come back, even for their high school diploma. That's the kind of opportunities we provide to our students, because we say this time and time again. Our chancellor, Mike Flores, says this often, that we're not competing against other institutions of higher learning. We're competing against poverty. So we need every student to feel welcome on our campus, to have those opportunities, to get that high school diploma, to get that associate's degree or that certificate or credential that they're needing for whatever career pathway they've got.
Under Dr. Flores and the supportive board he has, the community college has over the last couple of years really innovated
Yes.
in a couple of areas. What is the Alamo Promise?
An Alamo Promise is an opportunity for students, eligible high school student graduates in Bexar County, to be able to come to our campuses, our colleges, tuition and debt-free.
So what do you have to do to get to that status where you can get that?
You have to save your seat. So if you Google Alamo Promise, you'll go onto our website. You'll be able to see the students that are at our eligible high schools. They'll be able to go through the process of saving their seat. Right now, we have about 10,000 students in Bexar County who have saved their seat for next year.
Are they going to school tuition free? Is that?
When they save their seat and they go through the application process,
Right.
Once they've committed to come to our colleges, that is absolutely the promise that we make. We use Pell and all the other, we go through the federal, aid process first, and anything that's left over, we cover through Alamo Promise funds.
I'll come back to you in a second. Dr. Chavez, welcome to San Antonio. You are the newest president among the San Antonio institutions, and you have a distinguished background in science and technology, and we're very happy that you're in the city. You have a different role as the president of a private Catholic school on the west side. Tell us a little bit about what drew you here and how you see the role of Our Lady of the Lake in the larger picture of San Antonio's higher education.
Thank you for the invitation, Henry. Greatly appreciate you and the leadership that you provide, especially in these matters of higher education and economic development, which, as you stated earlier, education is a key part of that. And Our Lady of the Lake University, we are in the West Side. For some folks who might not know the West Side, we are one of the most impoverished communities, neighborhoods. Yes, of course, in San Antonio, of course, in Texas, but also in the U.S. And education is a key pathway to alleviating some of that poverty. And Our Lady of the Lake University, we serve about 2,500 students. As a private, faith-based institution, we provide an excellent experience of about 12 students per every teacher. And for many students, that works very, very well and incredibly productive to have that small classroom ratio to be able to truly engage in the complex issues of our time. And as a private institution in the West Side, and as an engineer myself, I take personal obligation and responsibility to continue to think like an engineer holistically across the community to make sure that we not only continue to serve as a key economic driver for the community, but that we're also inserting our students back into their home neighborhoods to take on leadership roles, to provide voice to those communities,
Right.
and drive some of that economic development back into the same communities that they're from.
I've always said that education, higher education, is an act of faith in the future. Just give me a sentence on your sense of the future in these troubled times in our country and the role of education. Both of you. We'll start with you, Dr. Chavez, and end with you.
Sure. Well, and today, like at no any other time in history, society is questioning the value of higher education. I believe that is an unfair questioning. The three of us are a great example of what higher education can do. Myself, parents, immigrants from Mexico. Dad did not complete high school. Mom did not finish middle school. But through hard work and diligence and persistence, we are serving our communities because of what higher education did for us, and that's what we have to continue to do: provide access, retain our students' persistence, and graduate our students. Very hopeful.
You're actually choosing this profession as an act of hope and faith in and of itself. Priscilla, how do you see this?
You know, Henry, you mentioned, my experience in chambers. I believe education, whether it's K through 12 or higher ed, is absolutely at the center of economic development in any region. Mm-hmm. We are the centers of research and development, of human development. Right. And that's the kind of message we need to send to our community members.
Thank you very much for joining us today in this program that deals with the future of our economy. And clearly you've made the case education is an integral part of our economic future. Thank you.
Thank you.
We know the San Antonio area is growing. That's a given. And it's going to be growing for some time. But what we don't know as much about is why are we growing? What are the sources of that growth? We're fortunate to have with us today Professor Lloyd Potter of the University of Texas at San Antonio, Demography Department, but also the state demographer. He has that appointment as the state demographer. Dr. Potter, what does it mean to be the state demographer?
Well, the state demographer is a position that was created by the legislature, and it's a position that's appointed by the governor. And the responsibility of the state demographer is to produce population estimates and population projections for the state, but then also to advise the legislature, the governor's office, state agencies, and so on demographic-related issues. And then we also serve as a resource for communities, cities, counties, and so on.
What about the growth we're experiencing? First of all, is it a sustainable growth? Is this continued growth we're likely to continue to see? Or not?
Yeah, I think in the not too distant future, yes, it's definitely sustainable. At some point it gets too far beyond what even I can predict. But when we look at the trends, yes, it's been pretty sustaining and sustainable. When we look at the growth that we've experienced, last year between 2020 and 2021, San Antonio added 14,000 new residents. And so that's significant growth.
So this is a substantial, I mean, this is a significant fact, because some people would like to wish it away and say, you know, we don't need to make improvements in transportation, et cetera. The growth is either not that great or not going to continue. But it's a kind of a mathematical problem. If the growth continues, we will have congestion unless we take steps to address it. So it's important to know why that growth is coming.
Yeah, and when we look at the growth that we've experienced in the Bexar County area, the bulk of it is from what we refer to as natural increase, more births than deaths. And so that's just people here in San Antonio having children.
And our demographics lend themselves to larger families and more births.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah, we're a younger population, meaning we have more people in the childbearing years and not that many people dying. So that's kind of the driver of that natural increase.
And how about in-migration?
So in-migration domestic migration counts for about 30% of the population change in San Antonio. And so that's a significant thing, because migration is the element of population change that creates demand for infrastructure.
The bottom line is we can count on this growth continuing, which is a good thing, but we must also prepare for growth as a absolutely fundamental reality.
Yes, when you have people, you have to have infrastructure to support them. And the more people we have, the more infrastructure we need.
Glad you're on the job, doing that job as the state demographer, but we have the state demographer here to address our own information needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ask almost anyone who lives and works in San Antonio what they see from all the economic growth we have. And the first thing many people will say is traffic jams. Mobility and traffic issues are the downside of a robust economy, and they will have to be dealt with. We're fortunate today to have Diane Rath, who's the Executive Director of the Alamo Area Council of Governments, and she's one of the most knowledgeable people on the growth of our region. She has responsibility for this broad multi-county region and has a perspective that deals with Central Texas as well. Diane, thank you for coming today. What is your sense of the growth that we have? Or is this a sustainable rate of growth for the long haul? And what kind of issues does it pose?
We are very lucky to be living in a time of tremendous growth, which has advantages and also challenges that we must deal with. When you look at San Antonio, last year, the fastest growing large city in the country, 7th largest city in the country. Some of us find that hard to believe. We also have New Braunfels, fastest growing small city. Their growth has been exponential. And if you look at our region that starts with the southern Bexar County counties and going up to the northern Travis County counties, that whole region is exploding. It's estimated to be about 7 million people by 2040.
Tell me about growth in the San Antonio area.
We are so fortunate because we have two things that companies look for. We have a labor supply. Our challenge is making sure we have an educated and skilled workforce, but we have that basic ingredient of workers. And then we also have affordable land. They can make an investment. They can go to Seguin in the industrial park and make that major investment. They can go to land in Atascosa, which is really just on the verge of exploding, and it's very affordable. You look at all the companies from southern San Antonio, New Braunfels, San Marcos, tremendous development, investment, and jobs being created.
When you combine a spreading geography of growth with population, that automatically raises the question of mobility. How do we get people to these places? Now, we have a reputation for having a pretty good freeway system here, but it's becoming increasingly congested, and we need to find other alternatives related to mass transit and so forth. But what's ACOG's outlook for the transportation challenges?
We have to realize that transportation is not just people and moving people, but also goods and supplies. Yeah. One of the reasons that we have such congestion is because of the trade. 40% of all U.S.-Mexico trade comes in at Laredo, which means it comes right up 35.
Which is why there's all those 18-wheelers on 35.
18-wheelers. In fact, if you look at Laredo, 2.3 million trucks cross Laredo into our country every year.
It's the busiest land port in the world.
Yes, sir.
Land crossing point between two nations in the world, and we're just up the road from
I was
that.
going to say, and it comes right through San Antonio.
So tell me about your efforts to enhance transit between San Antonio and Austin. You've been a pioneer in that effort.
We're working really hard to give alternatives to people because we have 2.3 million trucks coming right up that road. But we have the wonderful luxury of having San Antonio, New Braunfels, San Marcos, and Austin with thriving economies, new businesses every day, and the universities. We have 5 universities in San Antonio. You've got Texas State in San Marcos, and then, of course, University of Texas and other higher ed institutions in Austin. And the mobility between them is extensive. Yet the only way to get between any of those cities is get in your car and drive. We have no public transportation at all.
So from your vantage point, your perspective, you would have to be one of the primary observers of whether or not this central Texas metroplex is actually coming together. What do you think? Are we looking at the development of such a metroplex? And if so, are we doing the things we need to be doing to be ready?
We're working very hard to be ready and to give people options. When you think of San Antonio, 7th largest city, Austin, nearly the 10th largest city, the 2 largest cities in the country that close together.
Right.
And yet you have to have a car if you're going to go between them.
So it's mobility, but it's also water, and it's also adequacy of power, and it's also educational collaboration and housing prices in a rapidly growing area. There's a lot to be done.
There's a tremendous amount to be done. I have to salute SAWS because they've been looking and working very hard on diversifying our water source for over 25 years, and they've made great strides in that. But the transportation in I-35 continues to be a challenge. We have solutions. TxDOT is addressing it, but roads take 20 to 30 years.
Right.
So we've been working hard to develop a public transit system. Both in our Alamo region and in the capital region, we have rural transit systems that operate in the outlying area. So we've partnered, and I think it's a great story, with 6 public agencies. So we have Alamo Council of Governments, we have VIA, we have our MPO in the Alamo area, we have the MPO in the capital area, their version of VIA, their public transit system, and their rural transit have all collaborated to develop a schedule that can start operating in just a couple of months, having public transportation available.
Well, let's hope we can make that happen. Thank you for the leadership that you're providing at ACOG. Critical that we have regional thinking and regional planning with the growth that's before us. Thank you so much for coming over today.
Thank you very much for allowing us to be here.
We want to thank you for being here for this in-depth look at the San Antonio economy. And we want to thank all of our guests who shared their knowledge and expertise with us. You can see this show online at KLRN.org. I'm Henry Cisneros, and I thank you personally for being part of the San Antonio economy.